You ever had one of those days where the world just went upside down, everything went sideways, you had a crazy day at work, you go home exhausted, you flop on the couch and you say, "Man, I worked so hard today." And the person you live with or the cat says, "So what'd you do all day?" And the frustrating part about that is it felt like you didn't do anything you wanted to do. It was just one of those days where everything went crazy. We're going to spend the next 15 minutes and really talk about how to prioritize those days so that we feel more in control of what's going on so that we don't get home at the end of the day and go, "Man, that was a rough day," and not feeling any sense of accomplishment. Now, the reality is the reason we get such frustrating days is that we have a lot to do and there's a lot of interruptions in the way. Statistically, we're interrupted every 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Now, think about that. Did that seem like, I think I get interrupted more than that? Or did that seem like, oh, I would love to go, 3 minutes without being interrupted? We really are interrupted a lot. And when you think about, what causes those frustrating days where we feel no sense of accomplishment, sort of ask yourself, what gets in the way of you getting your job done? And is it other people? Is it volume of workload? Is it meetings? Is it red tape? Is it the phone? Is it the email? Is it your job? All of the things that get in the way of you doing your job are your job. The frustrating part is that we don't get to plan when all these things come along. We get more frustrated because you want to be able to do something and something else gets in the way. And of course, it has the priority. So we have to look at what our days look like, and every day divides into two different types of time. We have controllable time and uncontrollable time. And of course, our uncontrollable time is the frustrating part. So it is all the interruptions, all the things that, yeah, part of what you do, but you don't get to control where they happen. Anytime we have an emergency, literally or figuratively, we have a crisis we have to take care of. And we also have system imposed activities. So those are things that have to be done at a certain time. A meeting, something that is by the clock or by the calendar. And controllable time is anything left over. So, how much controllable time do you have? And most people think, well, I'm at work 8 hours. That's, no, because at least half of your day is the uncontrollable time, the stuff that has to get done and it has to get done now. So, when you look at your to do list, all the things you wanted to get done today, how many hours worth of work are on that list? 8, 10, 12. When in reality, you likely don't get 4 hours of controllable time. All that other stuff has to get done. It's not like you say no to it, but it has to be done right now, right? So it's between those moments that we get to go to our to-do list and say, "Oh, what do I need to work on?" And that's when we need to really prioritize our day to figure out what is it that I need to work on. Now, of course, I've been talking about lists. And we do need a list system. Absolutely. And so there's many different types of list system. If you go to top10.com, here's the 10 most popular. And I use a few of those. I like them. I use my own versions of them as well. Like for instance, I love lists. Do you ever write lists just so you can stroke stuff off and feel a sense of accomplishment? Because there is an endorphin rush with that, right? The reality is that happens, but we need to be focused, kind of like if you go to the grocery store and you're hungry, you're going to buy way too much. So we need to have a list so that we can be focused. Now, I use many different types of lists. I don't rely just on one because I can get immune to it. Have you ever closed down your computer on Friday afternoon and recognized that you had 40 open Outlook reminders? Like, how did I not see that there were so many there, right? So I do a couple. I'll just share mine, but all of these work really well as well. So number one, I'm a Post-it girl. I love Post-it notes. I like the neon colored ones. So what I do is at the end of every day, I look at what the next day looks like. So I use Microsoft To Do. I use Outlook, and I use a traditional just pen and paper, this week's agenda kind of stuff as well. So I've got a few. And I go look at what tomorrow is and the rest of the week. Kind of, I do this at the end of every day. And what I write on this Post-it note at the end of every day is no more than 5 things that are non-negotiable for the next day. So if I don't get them done, I'm going to get fired. And that's saying a lot because I'm self-employed, right? So these are 5 things I'm not likely to forget. Like I have a meeting at 10:30. I have the board of directors packet has to be shipped out by 4. These are things I'm not likely to forget. But what I do is I look at tomorrow and I say, what are the 5 things that I cannot go home until they're done? These are not I'd like to do. These are you're going to get fired if you don't do stuff. I take the post-it note and I stick it right on my monitor. Now, I'm competent. I'm able to get it done like you are, but it's kind of a in my head kind of face, right? As I'm figuring out my lists. Like I said, I also have my weekly to-do list that I just keep track of things, and I have pen and paper all the time. I use some of these programs like Trello as like online post-it notes. I use Microsoft To Do. I've used all of them, right, to keep me focused, because what I need to be with my lists is not all encompassing. This is not my wish list of what I hope to get done. It's a SMART goal. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So I'm going to set my big goals to be SMART goals, but I'm going to prioritize my day to be SMART too. And if I'm writing 10 to 12 hours worth of work down on a post-it note, I'm not being realistic at all. It's just a brain dump. And that's a brain dump is not the same as a to-do list. I have different types of to-do lists. Like my Microsoft to-do list is more of the everything that needs to get done eventually. But then I narrow it down to be much more specific, sort of like if I'm going grocery shopping and I only have $50 to my name, what am I going to buy for that $50? Not just the first $50 worth of stuff I like. So we need to do the same with work. We need to prioritize, and we're going to prioritize by making SMART lists, SMART goals. We're also going to prioritize based on our personal energy. Where do we do the best work of the day? Now, I've decided that you're one of 3 birds. You're either a lark, a robin, or an owl. You're one of these 3 things. And yes, you can change with time. Most of my life, I was a robin, which I'll describe in a second. As I get older, I've become a lark. So let's start with a lark. These are our early birds, right? These are the people that like to get up naturally. That's where all of their energy is in the morning. As the day goes on, they come down. It's not like they're bad during the day, but they're awesome during the morning. And so when I do this in person, I will, say, is there any larks in here? And I always get some hands up and I'm like, what time do you get up? And they're like, 4:30, quarter to 5. And I know any of the owls in the room go, 4:30 and quarter to 5 don't deserve in the morning at the end of them, because the owl is completely the opposite. They start slow. The owl comes in and says, don't talk to me till I've had a pot of coffee, right? And so they start slow and they gear up during the day. So larks will voluntarily come to work early, working overtime. And if you are a lark, what you want to do is you want to front end your day so that the most important, what I call the big ticket stuff, is at the beginning of the day. So don't get caught in your habits. Don't get caught going, if you're a lark, starting and just clearing up your email. Because if it's 6:30 in the morning and you're sitting at your desk, that email can wait till 8 o'clock or even 8:30, right? And depending on your time zones, of course. But you want to make sure that you're doing the heavy lifting first thing in the morning. And the lark gets about 2 hours. So if they're in the office by 7, 7 to 9 is your best time. If you don't do it in that 7 to 9 chunk or that first 2 hour chunk, what's going to happen is you're going to procrastinate. And then, of course, we run into prioritizing problems, right? The owl's completely the opposite. So it's totally fine for the owls to start off with the easy work. Let's clean up my email. Let's return my phone calls. Let's do the easy stuff, because then as the caffeine kicks in or whatever, they get better. Owls have a hard time leaving work on time. So if you've ever received an email from someone that had a timestamp of like 10:59, you're like, why are they doing email at 11 o'clock at night? They're an owl. And so you want to kind of force yourself to come home at time. Of course, not work at 11 o'clock at night, but recognize, start early and work up to the bigger ticket items. If you try to do them in the morning, you're not going to do a good job because that's not where your energy is. And the robin is where most people are, right in between. And so they typically will take an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. So they're very social in the morning. You want to see everybody at work, but they'll get an hour of really heavy duty stuff. Then they'll be average. And then in another, say 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, they'll get another hour of really good. So what you want to do is schedule as much as your job allows accordingly, kind of like exercise. I know that if I don't exercise first thing in the morning, The odds are it's not happening because I've got lots of other stuff that gets in the way. So think about where your energies are. You may not be exactly one of those birds, you could be moving around, but when you are planning your day, you want to say, okay, this is where I'm at my peak. This is where this task should be done. So if you've been avoiding doing your minutes or, the tasks that you hate doing them in your peak is the right answer, because I need you to be effective the way you work. Like my head there. I already know you're efficient. Efficiency is doing the right thing. If you weren't efficient, you wouldn't keep your job. But by prioritizing properly, you can be effective. And that's doing the right thing at the right time. Now, Dr. Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of those habits is first things first, came up with this matrix, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with as well. And this is how you prioritize. And it's based on the urgency of the task. Make it easy. Deadline. When is it due? So what would be high urgency for you might be low urgency for me, but it's what is your deadline? How close? How much time do you need? More importantly, although deadline is important, what he says is how important is the job or how important is the task? Now, I'd like to think that all of the work that you do is important, but this is the consequence of not doing it. When there's a consequence of not doing it, it becomes very important. Now, quadrant 1 is all of those crises, all the things that you have to stop what you're doing and deal with it now. And I used to have a sign on my desk. Don't write this down. The sign said, lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. But the reality is, of course it did. I'm an admin, right? So yes, you messed up, I'll take care of it. So quadrant 1, you have very little control over, unless you're putting yourself in there. And then you really do need to manage your priorities better. But look at how much time you're spending in quadrant 1 and how much of it is your fault, because you can fix that, and how much of it is other people. You can't really fix that. The secret is quadrant 2. And quadrant 2 is where it's just as important on the task that you're doing, but you've got the benefit of time. So what I want you to do is build an extra 30 minutes into your day that you have not been doing right now, and doing things that are not quadrant 1. All this stuff is quadrant 1, right? You've got to do it, but it's more of your, you know what, I've got the middle report due at the end of the month. I've got, 8 days. Spend an extra 30 based on your bird. First thing in the morning, last thing at night, or if you're a robin, you want to divide it into 2. You're going to get caught in quadrant 3. Quadrant 3 is what eats all our time away from quadrant 2. So these are other people's emergencies. So this is where the bulk of your day is, but you want to catch yourself from spending all of your day there, because you absolutely need that 30 minutes in quadrant 2. Quadrant 4 is typically the stuff that we like doing. So think about, what is your favorite? I like building PowerPoint. So it's easy for me to spend extra time on PowerPoint, right? And so that's where you're over investing your effort. There's not enough return on investment in quadrant 4. So quadrant 1, you have no choice. Quadrant 2 is the secret. Quadrant 3, we get trapped into. So make sure you build an extra 30 minutes a day, wherever your energies are in quadrant 2. And you might be able to do that through the 3 different types of scheduling or prioritizing that exist. We have time blocking, time batching, and day themes. So time blocking is saying, every day at 10 minutes to the hour, I'm going to go do email. I'm going to be in my email for 10 minutes every hour, and then I'm out. And so you're blocking certain amounts of time to do that. Or I need to do the budget today. I'm blocking an hour to do the budget. That's time blocking. And that's like booking an appointment in your calendar. That's like if you and I had a meeting, you would show up and you would do it. Time batching, of course, is when you're doing similar things. So you're going to do all the quarterly reports this afternoon, or you're going to do all the performance reviews, or you're going to make all the schedules for interviews. You're batching and doing similar things at the same time. I don't work so well with day themes personally, but I know that there are a lot of people who say today's cleanup day, today's month end day, today is X day, and they do it all. Now, all of these work. But the problem is we get caught not being able to make decisions. We get trapped by indecision. And so when you find yourself kind of fluttering around, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, you're all over and you're not focused. Ask yourself, what's your problem? Is it, I don't know what to work on? Go back to your lists. your priorities, right? Because we fall into habits, and 80 to 90% of our behavior is habitual. And we know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? So if I want to prioritize, it's up to me to see the benefit of the priorities. And that's motivation. What is your motivation for getting on top of your schedule, for getting organized, for being able to leave work on time? And I know that once you decide this is what works for you and you stick with it, it works. Good luck.